Welcome everyone. Today we're going to be looking at ellipsis, and this really should serve as a refresher to information that was shared last school year. So let's get started. The agenda for today is reminding you first how to get to ellipsis, and then we're going to bookmark that because we want to be able to get to it very easily. We're going to look at course resources. There has been a bit of a refresh since the first time we came out and talked about this, so we'll just take a little tour of any ellipsis resources that are out there. Next, we're going to look at lesson unpacking. So this is going to be the really important information. How do I take an ellipsis lesson and actually teach that to my students? What do I need to include? What do I not need to include? I am going to recommend that you take some time with your grade level team and even yourself individually to do some planning. So I'm going to give some suggestions for that. And then finally, we'll end with a little warning. So to get started, you're going to go to cdp.ellipsiseducation.com. Now you may have already bookmarked that from last year. The logo that you're looking for is a little black icon with some parentheses. You're going to continue with email. And if for some reason you have forgotten your password, you can click this Forgot Password. Once you're ready, you'll click Sign In, and you'll be brought to your dashboard. Now you should have your course from last year. That should still be available. If you are switching grade levels this year, and that change has not happened on your ellipsis dashboard yet, please email our team and we'll get that change sent over to ellipsis. They'll give you the new course and they'll take away that old course. If you are responsible for teaching more than one grade level, you can also email our team and we can add additional grade levels onto your dashboard. So I've got this dashboard here. Everyone should see the educator guide, which is essentially exactly what I'm going through in this training and just out in a PDF form. And then we also have our course cards. As a reminder, at the bottom of each course card, you're going to see a days of instruction as well as minutes per day. We can ignore both of those things. This is really just some guidance, but we're really going to dig into the resources to see, okay, what am I actually going to teach and how much of it? So I'm going to use grade 3 as my example today, but all the courses are built the exact same way. So let's look at the course resources. If I click on course resources, I'm going to see two items: the pacing guide and syllabus and the standards map. Let's first take a look at the pacing guide and syllabus. So for each of the courses in Ellipsis, we have a pacing guide, which is going to give us the day number within the school year, the lesson name, the lesson type, and as a reminder, those lesson types would be digital citizenship, unplugged, coding, and STEM careers. Next, we have the aligned standards, which we're going to talk about in just a second, and then the time required. That time required is really just a suggestion. If you don't have a 45-minute block, you don't need to take a 45-minute block. We're also going to see some areas of the lesson that we can eliminate. So really, most of the lessons shouldn't take 45 minutes. With that being said, the Scratch introduction lesson will likely take more than 45 minutes if your students have never done Scratch before. That does not include Scratch Junior, that's only Scratch, which would be available on the Chromebooks. Okay, so as we look at all of this information, I just want to remind you of the Indiana Computer Science Standards. So I'm going to pull those over and we're going to take a look at this. This will be sent in our resources, so you'll have access to these. But these Indiana computer science standards cover grade bands. Why is that important? Because the question is always asked, okay, here is the standard. Define stored information as data and when appropriate, copy, search, retrieve, modify, and delete it. That's a K2 standard. So who covers it? Is it kindergarten? Is it first grade? Is it second grade? The answer is yes, everyone. It's covered in varying depths and with different knowledge activities and different items that the students will be reviewing. So everybody can cover it. It's just going to look a little different at each grade level. So you are welcome to browse these standards as you see fit. If you've got any questions on those, feel free to reach out. You can also reach out to your instructional coach. The next item that I wanted to point out is the iLearn test blueprint for grade 4. So this is really helpful information for all teachers. I'm looking into, as a third grade teacher, I'm kind of preparing my students for this. And then as a fourth grade teacher, these are the standards that my students are actually going to be tested on. So you can see here's the computer science standards. It's approximately 16% of the test. And then each of these standards here, whether it's a standard or essential. So you're going to see that there. And then how many items might be included in the test itself. So again, very good information if you're looking at what exactly do I need to make sure that my students learn. And then the final resource from the DOE is going to be this iLearn Computer Science Item Specifications. So again, we see that standard, the grade 3 through 5 band, because that we're testing those fourth graders. We're going to see what practices might be included in that, clarifications, content limits. So items are not about debugging. So that would be like code, debugging code. They're not hardware or software specific. What this means is we're not specifically talking about iPads. We're not specifically talking about Chromebooks, things like that. Expected vocabulary, not expected vocabulary. So again, we're looking at each of these items and really specifically pulling this stuff out to see what do my students need to know, what's being included. If that is a lot of information, we totally understand, which is kind of the reason we looked at Ellipsis. So when we look at Ellipsis, this takes all that guesswork out of it. I follow these lessons, I look at the standards to make sure that they're being covered, and I can rest assured that my job is done in terms of teaching computer science standards. Okay, so each of our courses here include that pacing guide and syllabus, as well as that standards map. So if I want to look specifically at the standard itself, so those individual standards there, then I am able to organize it that way. And what else I can look at here is all of these lessons that might be aligned to that standard. So you can see each of our standards has at least one lesson aligned to it, which is fantastic. Okay. So if I expand one of these standards, I'm able to see which lessons are covered and how they might build on each other. That's a really important piece. I don't want to skip ahead when my lessons will build on each other. The other thing that I notice is that some of these lessons, most of them, are unplugged, and then we've got one STEM careers. The last thing I see is that they take about 20 minutes. This is really good information for me to kind of gather as I'm deciding how are we going to unpack these lessons and actually put them into play with my students. So now that we've taken a look at some of those course resources, let's look at the 2 ways that we have already seen those lessons organized. We have the daily lesson suggestion, and this is really the easiest option if you're wanting to just try things out. You can start with the earlier lessons because those will be easier for you and your students, and skip anything you think won't apply well. So just kind of go through and say, I'm going to try this one, we're going to try this one, maybe we're going to skip this one, we're not quite ready for that yet. That is one option. I start with day 1 and I go through day 45 or day 38, sorry. And then the other option, of course, is that standards map. This is the best option if you're trying to integrate lessons into existing science and computer science curriculum. So you've already got a computer science curriculum map and you want to just integrate some of these lessons within that. We still suggest following that day recommendation in terms of the sequencing. So don't skip from day 35 back to day 21 over to day 38. But this at least organizes it in standard. So that standard band is going to stay all together. Okay, so we know what you're thinking. 30 to 45 minutes? That's a lot of time. How do I make this work? So we have a few implementation ideas, and this is definitely not an exhaustive list. Like, there's a lot of other ways that you could make this work. These are just some of the things that we have seen work from other teachers and then that we recommend as a Connected Learning team. So maybe we start with Computer Science Fridays or Computer Science Mondays, something that the lesson is already planned for me. So all I'm going to do is just make sure that over the course of the year, we cover each of those lessons. What about a computer science unit? You know, similar to how we might chunk some of our other content areas, we can also chunk our science, right? So we take a computer science unit, do about 3 to 5 weeks of it, and then we're done. We can also use these as short week lessons. Thanksgiving, maybe before or after winter break. So if there are some shorter weeks coming in the school year, maybe that's when we pack in some of those computer science lessons, especially if we're going to look at banding those standards together. We can include a lot of those lessons back to back in sequential order. It could also be part of a morning meeting. So in a morning meeting or community circle, maybe we are including some of the discussion questions or the unplugged lessons where the students are really just getting to know some of that content. Make one single lesson last an entire week. So I know we talked about 30 to 45 minutes. If that lasts an entire week, that's less than 10 minutes a day spending on a computer science lesson. And then the last option, and we want to just give a warning for this, you still need to make sure that you are including all of the content and resources because subs will not have access to the platform, but this could be used as sub plans. I know we looked previously at a 20-minute lesson that was unplugged. If I print out all of those resources and get them ready for the sub, that's something that maybe a sub might be able to handle and do. Okay, we're going to go ahead and look at one of our lessons. So I'm going to pull up my third grade lessons here, and then I'm going to flip back over and look at a second grade lesson. So once I click view, let's do just a quick tour. We've got those days that we are familiar with. We have those lesson titles, the time suggested for a lesson, as well as the digital citizenship, unplugged, coding, STEM careers, all of that. If I want to view a lesson, I can do that here. If I click more, it's going to give me a little description. And then also I've got materials here. We'll see those in other places too. This is going to include the learning objectives as well as the standards. So lots of information on this single page. Over on the right-hand side, I have the course description. I have summative assessment questions. So this is an optional assessment. You can give it throughout the course, maybe as a pre, mid, and post assessment. And then I also have keyboarding skills that are also optional. Keyboarding is something that is hit heavily in Tech Lab, so I wouldn't worry too much about covering those keyboarding skills in your classroom. But if you're looking for something specific, that might be a good resource for you. All right, so if I continue to scroll down, I'm going to see all of these lessons here, and I believe I was looking really at this, how computers work. So I'm going to click on that lesson, and I'll see a PDF of the lesson plan. All right, let's skip back to the other lesson that I want to show you. And the reason I want to show you this one is for these green boxes here, because these are actually going to give us a little bit more information about what's really important and maybe what's not as important. So the first thing that we suggest is actually taking a look at the teacher preparation area on your PDF first, the teacher preparation area. So if I'm looking back at that third grade example, I do have to actually scroll down a little to find this teacher preparation area. So that's what I'm looking for, because it's going to give me kind of everything that I need in one location, and then I can find expanded resources throughout the PDF. So teacher prep area. It says print or open the Internet Safety Tips handout to display in the front of the class. I could use it or I could skip it. I could also just pull it up on my board. I don't necessarily have to print it out. Make a copy for each student. I don't necessarily have to do that. So that's something that I can decide, is this necessary for me to have a copy for every student? If not, skip it. All right, the next one is open and queue this online safety video from BrainPop UK for display. All that means is I'm clicking that link and opening it in a new tab so that my students, or when I'm ready, my students can watch that on my board. So I'm just displaying this video and we're watching it. That's it. Print or open the should I post it handout. Make a copy for each student, and then it tells me where the answers are located. This is one where I could maybe just use it as a discussion question. So now we have a 5-minute video and a set of discussion questions. This is a pretty quick option here for me and my students, and is definitely something that could be included in a community meeting, a morning meeting, anything like that. So a video with some discussion questions. Then after that, we have our exit ticket and our formative assessment. At this point in our implementation, we actually recommend skipping both of those things. At this point, it's taking up time, and what we really want is the content. So I want to just take a look too at, we pulled out the discussion questions for the students, so that's should I post it. So once you watch that 5-minute video, these 3 questions here, those are the things that you're going to talk about with your students. So we just took what would be a 30-minute lesson and pared it down to maybe 10 minutes. So we're really taking a lot of that content and just breaking it down. So let's do the exact same thing with this 3rd grade lesson here. All right, it says to prepare to put students in groups of 3 or 4. So this looks like maybe something that my students are going to be working in groups. All right, so then I want to make a copy of this worksheet here. Pull that over. Okay, computer hardware think tank. Gives me some instructions for my students. And then I've got a set A, a set B. So I've got a little activity here. I'm just preparing this. I don't know anything about that activity. So there were a lot of things on there, and I don't have any idea what we're doing with those things yet. So that's something to note. All right, then I'm going to open up this YouTube video. Fantastic. Okay, I can see that this YouTube video is 4 minutes and 17 seconds. Okay, great. Under 5 minutes. Then I'm going to open this computer parts. And this looks kind of similar to what my students were looking at on their worksheet. Yeah, it's the same items that my students are looking at on their worksheet. Great, and that exit ticket, and I've already been given the permission to skip that exit ticket. So now what I need to do, okay, so I have my video, great, love it, 4 minutes, 17 seconds, and now I'm going to go back up and I want to check out. I'm going to maybe read through this activity description. I've got my learning objectives, and if I scroll down, here's the part that I need, the activity procedures. So this is now going to take those worksheets and stuff and make them make a little more sense to me. All right, I see this: assign students. As students work to discuss the questions, formulate answers, and provide evidence, encourage students to use the discussion phrases. Okay, so what do the items in set A have in common? What do the items in set B have in common? How do both sets of items work together? So they're kind of discussing each of these sets and maybe identifying them, and then what do they have in common? And then here's some follow-up questions. How do we define the word computer? What I love about Ellipsis too is that this question here might be a little difficult for me to just answer on my own. So it gives me an answer. Now it tells me students may have variations of this definition. Once volunteers have explained their thoughts, display the basic definition of a computer on a whiteboard or chart paper. So maybe I have students all write down what they think the definition of a computer is. Like, what are some aspects of a computer? And the basic definition here is a computer is a machine that processes information. And then it gives me more kind of discussion questions and things to ask my students. At the end, it says, if time permits, share the following interesting fact. So it's giving me a lot of like time fillers if I need them. How does a computer work? So this is where we would then look at that video. So the activity is just kind of getting the students to realize that computers are everywhere, and they're not just that big desktop computer that's sitting on your desk. There's a lot of different types of computers in our world. And then finally, we look at how computers work. So they get a little more explanation on the inner workings of a computer. So a lot of good information here. And then as I scroll completely down, I see that I've got my exit ticket as well as a challenge. So if my students are ready to take that next step, we have those things in here. What if I wanted to leave this for a sub? Now this lesson isn't completely unplugged because they do need to have the link to that video. That's something to note. But notice that I'm able to download the lesson plan here and then I could print it. I would not recommend doing that with this lesson because again, we have that video that we would have to show. Maybe the sub does the lesson, the group work ahead of time, and then you come in the next day and you show the video, but those are just some things to think about as we're unpacking these lessons. All right, the next example that I want to take a look at is using the internet responsibly. So this is going to be a second grade lesson. And this is what they say is a 30-minute lesson, okay? 30-minute lesson. This is that one that we saw earlier where we kind of skipped some of those things. So again, looking at that teacher preparation area, I have the internet safety tips that I could display or I can just talk through with students. I've got that brain pop video and then the handout for each of my students. We decided that we don't necessarily have to do all the parts of the lesson. Here's that handout. Should I post it? And again, this might be something that we just display this birthday party at my house. See you at this location. Should you post it? Yes or no, why or why not? Maybe you get students up and moving. They're going to move to this side of the classroom if they say yes, this side of the classroom if they say no. So a little physical activity there, but also could be just our discussion questions. So with this, we have an introduction discussion, so quick 5 minutes. We have video and questions, and then we have that should I post it. This could be one 15-minute lesson, or it could be 3 5-minute chats over the course of a week. So that I take that lesson that was chunked at 30 minutes, and I did not have 30 minutes, break it into 3 days. I do maybe 5 to 10 minutes each day, and then we are done with that lesson. So this is just a really easy way to look at some of those resources in a new light. We don't want you to get overwhelmed with that timing aspect because a lot of these things can be broken up. You see here, we've got 2 of the same lesson. So you might see this in your courses. This could happen occasionally where you start a lesson, you are a computer scientist, and then you finish it the next day. So it's the exact same lesson. Nothing is different between these 2 days, but you take 15 minutes each day to complete the lesson. So this might be one where we see the lesson twice, but we're actually going to only cover it once because we are paring down some of the activities and we don't need to take the full 30 minutes. So again, really dig into the lessons. That's going to give you a good idea of, do I need to cover it? Do I want to cover it? And how long is it going to take me to cover it? So we believe you really have 2 options. You can break it down or map it out. By breaking it down, maybe amongst your team, you split up the lessons. So you say you're going to cover lessons 1 through 10, I'm going to cover lessons 11 through 20, and so on. You take notes on the lessons that you really want to use, and then you record some time estimates. So like go into the lesson and say, okay, it says this lesson's going to take 30 minutes. We're going to take off 5 minutes for the exit ticket, and we're going to take off 5 minutes for this activity. So now we're down to 20 minutes. So here's a lesson, takes 20 minutes, and I think we should cover it. So then, organize everything as a team to say, I think these are the priorities that we need to make sure that we cover. Looking at then those Indiana standards and the iLearn blueprints and all of that stuff. The other option is to map it out. So you look over the lessons in the standards plan, decide what you'd like to fit in and how you're going to fit those things, how and when. And then you can also then link some of those lessons to your existing curriculum map. So you might already have science curriculum maps that you're then just going to plug these computer science lessons into. We recommend pausing this video now. You don't necessarily need to take 15 minutes to work, but I would take 5 to 10 minutes to look through some of your lessons, look through those standards that are linked in the Learning Lab, and begin to map out a plan for this. Maybe send an email to your team. Hey, I'd like to meet about these computer science standards. When can we talk about how we're going to fit some of these lessons in? So pause the video now, take a little break, stretch your legs, and then come back and we'll keep going. The next item that we're going to look at is Scratch. Now, depending on your grade level, you might be doing lessons on Scratch Junior on the iPad app or Chromebook app, or Scratch, again, on the Chromebook. So there are a few words of warning for this. Prepare for the Scratch lessons. So these aren't as easy as some of the other computer science lessons. I can't just pull it up and pull up a couple videos and we're good to go, and I've got some discussion questions. These are going to take a little more preparation. Try it as a student, but use the teacher lesson plan for the answer key. So the most wonderful thing ever that Ellipsis did was give us the answer key to these. Don't feel bad about taking away the exploration side of things, and you'll see what I mean when we get in there. It's still a challenge for the students. So even if you're just covering the basics, you're still covering quite a bit of new information for some of your kids. And we recommend planning for extra time. So we don't believe that 45 minutes is really going to work. With some of these lessons, it's going to take a little longer, and I'm really speaking to those 4th and 5th grade teachers. But let's look at a lesson. So I pulled up a 4th grade lesson. It does say 45 minutes. This would be one where maybe we break it down into multiple days. So the first thing I want to point out is that on the right-hand side here, we have additional materials. So it's not just the lesson plan. There are teacher slides, student slides, and a starter file. These are going to be really important. If I scroll down to that teacher preparation area, you're going to also see that this area even is bigger, more details. Okay, so the first thing that I want to mention with this is a lesson that's like a few days into doing computer science. So we've already introduced Scratch. You've already created their accounts, all of that stuff. This is now we're going to actually go and do a lesson in Scratch. So you'll need to obviously use Scratch. Students will have to have Scratch open. There are teacher slides, so a presentation that's going to give you all the information that you need to cover. The other thing that you'll need is the starter file. In many of these Scratch lessons, you have something called a starter file, and it's what the students start with and then use for the lesson. So all of that is included here, but I really want to highlight these teacher slides. So the teacher slides include all that information, but in a way that you could present it to students. So the learning objectives, the lesson description, vocabulary that you might need to be covering with students, and then some review. So it's going to give you all the steps that you need to do with students in Scratch. And then finally, we get to today's lesson, what we're actually going to be covering. The project is Dino Jump Game, all of that. So then we go into the game starter file. This is something that you would load in for the students or share with them on Google Classroom. Click that remix button again, so it's going to give them all the information to get started with that starter file. Wonderful screenshots, which is fantastic. Dino game discussion questions. And then these modifications. Okay, so the modifications are that extension that we don't necessarily need to cover within that first lesson here. Okay, this is the best part. This is the solution, or one possible solution that you could then share with students. So they're still going to have to go through each of the blocks and add these things. So even though you're giving them the answers, it's still going to be a challenge for them to complete this. So all of that information in there is included in this teacher lesson plan. Now what I noticed is, even though I had all those slides and all those answers, I didn't really learn anything. I still don't really know what the students are going to be learning. That's when, as the teacher, I really need to go to Scratch and try this lesson on my own. So I need to do the lesson first and then share that with students. The last thing I want to mention is there are Ellipsis video playlists available on YouTube, and these include all of the videos that you might need for your grade level. So remember, we already looked at this online safety one, or we at least knew that we had to cover this one. So these are all of the videos that are available to you for your lesson. So those things are already packaged together. And you're able to save that playlist. So if you click on this little plus button here, you can save the playlist so that you have it for future reference, so that you're able to easily find those videos. Those are also linked in your lesson plans, but that's just an easier way to find it as well. Of course, if you have any questions, please reach out to our team. We're happy to help with this. And thank you so much for watching today.